I stared at Matthew, my mind spinning as I tried to process his words. "Wait," I said, cutting him off, my voice laced with disbelief. "Who did you say brought you here?" Matthew looked at me with a calm, steady gaze, his eyes filled with concern. "Your husband," he repeated gently, as if saying my husband would somehow make it more believable. I blinked, my heart skipping a beat. Grayson, the same man who hadn't bothered to show his face in 4 days. The same man who left me alone, broken and grieving. Why would he do that? It didn't make sense. Nothing about this made sense. "Grayson did?" I asked again, my voice a mere whisper as I tried to make sense of it all. The idea that Grayson had reached out to my brothers, that he had thought of me, of my need for my family, felt like a cruel twist of fate. It clashed violently with the image of him I had held onto, the cold, detached man who seemed to care for nothing but his own needs. Matthew nodded, his grip on my hand tightening slightly. "Yes, Ari," he did. "He said it was important for us to be here with you." I chuckled softly, pondering what could be running through his mind. Was this a sign of guilt or regret? Or was it just another one of his games, another calculated move to manipulate the situation in his favour? I shrugged off the thought of whatever plans he might have had, deciding not to waste my energy trying to decipher his intentions. Right now, all that mattered was that Matthew was here, sitting beside me. Without a second thought, I leaned forward and hugged my brother tightly, my body shaking with renewed sobs. The tears came fast and hard, a release of all the fear, loneliness, and desperation I had been holding inside. "I missed you so much, Matt," I cried, my voice breaking with emotion. "I've been so scared without you and Ethan and Gabriel. I didn't know what to do or where to turn." Matthew hugged me back just as tightly, his own tears wetting my shoulder. "I missed you too, Ari. We've all missed you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "It's been so hard not knowing if you were okay, not being able to help." We stayed like that for a long moment, holding each other and letting our tears flow freely. It felt like a small piece of the burden I'd been carrying had been lifted, just having him here with me. Finally, I pulled back, wiping the tears from my cheeks with the back of my hand. "How are Ethan and Gabriel?" I asked, my voice still shaky from crying. "Did they agree to this?" Matthew hesitated for a moment, then shook his head. "They're both still angry, Ari, especially Gabriel. They're not ready to hear anything from you yet." My heart sank at his words, a fresh wave of pain washing over me. I had expected as much, but hearing it still hurt. "I thought so," I said quietly, my voice filled with hurt. The weight of their absence settled heavily on my shoulders. Matthew reached out and placed a comforting hand on my arm. "I know they're mad, but they do love you. We all do. And I know they miss you, even if they won't admit it right now." I nodded, trying to hold on to his words, but deep down, doubt gnawed at me. I knew my brothers loved me, but I also knew they felt I had disappointed them deeply. I wasn't sure if things could ever go back to the way they were. "How did Grayson bring you here?" I asked, trying to shift the conversation away from the pain in my heart. Matthew let out a sigh, rubbing the back of his neck. "Your husband didn't come personally," he explained. "He sent his men and they took me by force. I didn't have much of a choice in the matter because I wanted to see you so badly." My eyes widened in shock. "They what?" I echoed, unable to believe what I was hearing. Grayson's actions never ceased to surprise me, but this was something else entirely. "Don't look so shocked," Matthew added quickly, noticing my reaction. "They were polite at first, but things got rough when Gabriel and Ethan wouldn't cooperate. That's when they used force." The door creaked open, and I turned to see the nurse entering the room, her smile warm. "Good morning, Mrs. Anderson," she greeted me cheerfully, as if this were just another ordinary day. "Good morning," I replied. She approached the bed, checking a few monitors before turning her attention back to me. "I've reviewed your charts and everything looks good. You're all set to go home." Before I could respond, the door swung open again, and Florence entered the room, her expression as unreadable as ever. She carried a black bag, which she handed to me with a curt nod. "Change into these." Without a word, I took the bag and headed to the bathroom, closing the door behind me. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. Opening the bag, I found a simple, casual shirt dress inside. I slipped out of the hospital gown and into the dress, the soft fabric a welcome change from the stiff material I had been wearing. After taking a moment to compose myself, I returned to the room where Matthew and Florence were waiting. Matthew gave me a reassuring smile, his eyes softening as he saw me. I reached out, taking his hand in mine. The familiar feel of his touch brought a small measure of comfort, grounding me amidst the chaos of my thoughts. Florence led the way, and we followed her out of the hospital room, and I held onto Matthew's hand tightly, not wanting to let go, afraid that if I did, I might lose my grip on reality altogether. As we stepped outside into the crisp morning air, a black car waited at the curb, its engine humming softly. The driver stood beside it, holding the door open with a respectful nod. I exchanged a glance with Matthew, who gave my hand a gentle squeeze, his presence steady and comforting. I slid into the back seat, Matthew following close behind, and then Florence in the passenger seat. The door clicked shut, and the car drifted smoothly away from the hospital as another car followed behind. The car rolled smoothly up the grand driveway, and as we neared the mansion, Matthew's eyes widened in awe as he took in the lavish architecture, his gaze sweeping over the manicured lawns and the towering columns that framed the entrance. "This place is unbelievable," he murmured, clearly astounded. "It's like stepping into a palace." His awe quickly turned into shock as the car came to a stop, and he noticed the men in black suits stationed at every conceivable vantage point. As we stepped out of the car, my heart raced at the sight of Grayson's car parked prominently among the other cars. Its imposing presence served as a stark reminder of his looming influence, and a wave of anxiety and anticipation gripped me. Matthew tapped on me to get my attention. "Ari, what kind of man did you marry?" he asked, his voice low. "Is he a gangster, a mafia boss?" I saw Florence's sharp glance at Matthew, her eyes narrowing slightly in disapproval. The tension in the air was palpable, and I knew I had to address it before things escalated further. "Matthew," I said, my voice firm but calm, "just stop talking and try to cope with whatever you find here. It's best to just keep quiet." He looked at me, his confusion evident, but he nodded in acknowledgement. "All right, I'll try," he replied, though his unease was still clear. As we stepped inside the mansion, I turned to Matthew, who was clearly captivated by the house's beauty. His eyes roamed in wonder over the luxurious decorations. "I'm going to check on my husband," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Matthew nodded, still smiling, his gaze drifting back to the magnificent surroundings. "All right," he said, his tone filled with awe. "This place is something else. Can't imagine how people come up with ideas for such beauty." I gave him a reassuring brief smile before taking a deep breath and made my way upstairs. My heart pounded harder with every step. The closer I got to Grayson's presence, the more my anxiety intensified. How would I face him? What would his reaction be when he saw me? Would there be any trace of emotion in his eyes? I shook my head, struggling to push those thoughts aside. What was I thinking? I was only going upstairs to thank him for bringing my brother. Nothing more. I repeated this to myself, trying to convince my heart to follow the rational path my mind was setting. I reached the top of the stairs and approached the door to his room. With trembling hands, I turned the handle and pushed the door open. The scene that greeted me stopped me dead in my tracks. My breath hitched in my throat as I took in the sight of him, naked in bed with another woman.